And we'll begin. The principal part of this is learning the difference between developmental editing and copy editing.
Everyone see the screen?
Yes.
We're good? Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is my website. I welcome you to visit me. I have synopsis on my novels. I talk about different writing events. I'm certainly not pounding my chest, but to let you know, because you've invested your time and money in being with us tonight, I know what I'm talking about with the editing process. I got a degree in journalism. I was an English teacher, and now I'm a novelist full time. And my latest novel, Sisters of the Undertow, just was the runner up to the National Kindle Book Award in literary fiction. So I understand the process and the hard work. And when I'm with other writers, I get to do what I love best, talk about writing and teach. So please visit my website. Sometimes I have tips for writers. Now, Stephen King, the great horror writer, wrote a fantastic book for writers called On Writing. I picked up that book when I was writing my first novel. Oh my gosh, I learned so much from him about narrative pace. What you want in all writing is to have a great narrative pace, because if you don't, the reader gets bored and closes the book. So I love what he says: to write is human, to edit is divine, because that's the hard work. We love the writing part and inventing our characters and having fun with the dialogue, but the editing is the hard work that has to be done. Thank you. This is the perfect example of developmental editing. Developmental editing, it was what turns an ordinary story into something magical. Things readers talk about, that they don't forget the characters. Don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass. And this is from the great Russian author who was famous for the short story, The Cherry Orchard. So what are we doing in developmental editing? We're improving the structure of the manuscript, the plot, the setting, the character, the pace, the dialogue, and the tension. We can start it with the first draft, or we could do strategic planning in an outline, and it may continue during several drafts. I am this type of writer. I write an entire first draft, start to finish, done. And I go back, I reread, because I'm going to catch a lot more on a hard copy edit. It naturally slows me down in my reading. I'm going to do it leisurely, and I'll get a red pen, and that's where I find the copy edits, which is grammar, punctuation, and where I find holes in my manuscript. Either I didn't flesh out a character, I didn't create enough tension in the setting during a high emotional scene, or my dialogue is not a natural flow. So I write the first draft, I print it out, I do all that editing, and then I implement it into my Word doc, and that becomes the second draft. And I go on and on and on until I might get to draft 5. I've done everything I possibly could to improve that document. And I either give it to a beta reader, someone that's writing what I write, that I trust. And I say, read this as if you just bought the paperback and tell me what I'm doing wrong. I'm not asking them to correct the grammar. That's hard work. I'm not asking them to fix the hole. What I'm asking them to tell me is, Johnnie, I hated that character. He's just too perfect. Nobody's perfect. Or Johnnie, you write a high impact scene of a man and woman falling in love in the first kiss, and you just rush right through it. What is she thinking? What is he thinking? Okay, turn the page, please. So here's the goal of developmental editing. If you hire someone, very, very important, that professional, yes, someone that should have a degree in editing, English, journalism, a traditionally published author, someone that's been vetted. Their job is to guide you through the editing process without changing your voice. Now think about what I'm saying. The goal of developmental editing is to help you, the writer, improve your manuscript without taking you out of it. It still has to be your unique voice. So that is a time-consuming thought process that can never be rushed. Okay? When we look at developmental editing and literary elements, and Jesse, we're at that slide right before setting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right. This is where a developmental editor is going to improve your manuscript through plot. What storyline? Does it have a rising in action to the climax and then a fall in the action until the end of the story? Is it the setting? Just don't tell me she lives in a small town. You've got to paint the picture of Thibodaux, Louisiana, all the way from the beer joints on the bayou to where to get the best burger, to where to get the best crawfish etouffee, and what's the name of the church she goes to mass to. You got to build that town. Character, flesh out the character. Just don't say she's a pretty girl. Say she has hair that is so black it had a blue sheen to it, and the smallest freckle near the corner of her right eye. Okay? Detail, detail. Theme. If you were to look at this story you're writing and sum it up in one sentence, what's this story about? That's your theme. Okay? Let's look at the next slide. And writers, pardon me, using my own writing as an example because I don't have the copyright or the permission to use another writer's. So this makes it legally perfect. So the setting of a good girl. And if you look at that cover, and I don't think you could read it, but that's the theme of the novel. Learning who you are is accepting where you've been. And it was put on a tagline on the novel to lure a reader in, looking for a big emotional read about self-discovery. Okay, that's just a little marketing gimmick that the publisher uses. So let's look at a setting of a good girl. Next. Okay. So I'm describing a town in A Good Girl, and this is how I did it. A sadness seeped from the hospital square structure, the same sadness that engulfed the town. Wide open and gray, Victoria, Texas served oil fields. It fanned itself through the few remaining family farms and ranches into an encroaching web of commerce and box stores. A past of cowboys and cattle declined in 150 years to a concrete jungle of apartment complex and used car lots, all to accommodate the masses feeding from the same bloodline, oil. That's how you have to describe that town, especially if you're writing upmarket fiction, because it's got to be emotional and it's got to be character driven. So here's this girl going to say goodbye to her father in the hospital. Other literary elements is mood. Is it sad? Is it romantic? Is it stressful? Is it brilliant and happy? A girl gets a text from the boy she's fallen in love with saying, "What are you doing Friday night?" Okay. Style. Now, style is style, and diction is the style of writing. Okay. If it's set in the Deep South, you might want to use the slang of the Deep South. And Louisiana's gorgeous for that. How do I know that? My mama's from Crowley, which is perfect slang for Louisiana. Where's your mama from?
Uh-huh.
What's your last name? What's your mama's last name? Okay. And then once that character says it, oh my gosh, the images in the listener's mind. Well, I knew a Chauvin. Yeah. He thought he was something else in high school. Right? Okay, then we go to syntax. Syntax is the rules of English. Okay, subject verb agreement. So when you're writing style, it's okay to drop those subject verb agreements, okay? If you're using diction or the dialogue of South Louisiana, people do not speak in complete sentences. It's phrases, okay? Then we have the narrative point of views. And guys, this was something so important for me to learn as a writer. I wrote my first novel, third person point of view. Hard. Okay. The great thing about it, third person point of view, is that you're a narrator that can speak on all the characters. So what is first person point of view? Third person point of view. She opened the door and looked and saw that the suitcase was on the bed. And so then I could write in italics her inner thoughts. I knew he would leave me. And I knew he would tell me the reason why. Okay. Third person can do all that deep psychological reasoning with the characters. But first person is, for me, was easier, and you make an immediate intimacy with the reader, which is what you want. Because if you don't get the reader in chapter 1, he or she's not going to read chapter 2. So let's turn that page. So when I'm talking first person point of view, I knew this was going to be a bad day when I saw the flat tire in my driveway. Then I spilled my coffee all over myself. It's immediate connection with the reader. My novel 2, novel 3 are first person. I just found in what reviewers were saying on Amazon and what readers would tell me, they really connected to those stories. They fell in love with the characters. Okay? Another way we can create mood is mood in the introductory quotations. Okay? Now, the novel that came out in March, it's the story of two sisters. The firstborn is beautiful, gifted, everything comes her way. Yet, she's judgmental and elitist and is hurt by a boy in high school and never trusts men again. The second sister is born as a preemie at 29 weeks. She has a limp. She wears hearing aids. Yet her capacity to love others gives her a very different life. It's a hurricane that decides the fate of these two sisters in the last chapter. So to set that mood for the entire chapter, I use this quote: "Wisdom is brilliant, she never fades. By those who love her, she is readily available. By those who seek her, she is readily found. So the older sister eventually finds wisdom in the eye of a hurricane. There's something about being dropped to our knees that makes us realize what life is worth. So you could create mood before chapter 1 even starts with a very strong quote or a poem. All right? Here's a Good Girl, the first novel, which is all about a middle-aged woman driving back to Texas to say goodbye to her father, the last one in the family. Her mother was from Louisiana. The dad was a tough, rough man, as many men were during the 50s and 60s. It was a man's world. And this was a man that worked in the oil field, hard drinking, hard living man. And this older daughter was very attached to her mother from Louisiana, who died young, who always felt like her mother should have been loved well, that she deserved that. And so, in telling this story, I couldn't just say Henry was a hard living, hard drinking man. I had to give the reason why Henry was. You know, people just don't wake up and become alcoholics. People don't become drug addicts. It's usually something in their past, an addiction within a family line that drives that point. So it's a historical fiction. I had to give Henry's story, his father's story, and his grandfather's story. So I use this quote: yet by no means clear guilty, but visiting the inequity of the parents upon the children and to the children's children to the third and fourth generation. So way back in that family line, a male did something horribly wrong, and every generation paid for that sin. So it sets a tone and it adds some suspense. Thank you. Plot. Very, very important. Because if you don't have a decent plot, you don't have a story. And every plot follows this very basic pyramid. In fact, I've used this pyramid as a way to do an outline. Okay. Mm-hmm. You start out exposition, that's chapter 1, 2, 3. That's why they're so hard to write, because you can get so much information to the reader without being boring. And you've got to present a little bit of a problem. That's the rising action. Okay. So we use the example of the woman opening the bedroom door and her husband left her without leaving a note. Okay. What caused that? What's the backstory? How did they get to that? So you've got that rising action to climax. Does she go looking for him, or does she resign herself to another life? Does she love him enough to work for this marriage, or the love doesn't exist anymore? The building point. So everything in the rising action comes to a point in the climax. Okay. And then we have the falling action. That last part of the book, if you didn't mention it in the first part and resolved it one way or another, it shouldn't be in the book. You shouldn't be raising new ideas in that last half of the novel. Okay. And then we come to the resolution. What's the ending? So I said the last chapter of my novel is a hurricane. One sister, the one that was born prematurely, works as a nursing aide in a nursing home that is filling with water, and they're trying to evacuate the patients out. The other sister, who had every opportunity in life, yet was incapable of loving people completely, including herself. comes to her final decision before she loses it all. That's the resolution. Okay? So that whole first part of the novel is two sisters are born. This is the state they're born in. The climax is when this older sister rejects her and says, I'm tired of hearing about your medical problems. Our parents gave you all the attention because of your medical needs. I was always the kid in the waiting room at the doctor's office reading paperback books. It's always been about you. I'm over it. Here's the climax. Do they come back together later in life? Okay. Plot, very important. Okay, I've been talking about Sisters of the Undertow. If you'll turn the screen. This is the plot. Remember when I said you could use that pyramid as a way of planning out your novel? This is how I did it. I kept working on that little pyramid saying, okay, I want these two sisters. They're polar opposites, yin and yang. There's going to be a lot of friction between them in elementary school and junior high and high school, all the way to college, career choices, who gets married, who doesn't. So Sister of the Undertow explores the complexity of sibling rivalry when two sisters born 16 months apart discover life is not a matter of luck, but of choices made. It's all about attitude. Okay? So here's some things to ask yourself about your plot line. Is there a point to the story? Where are you going? Do you have a clear ending in mind? You know what? Many times when I outline a plot, I know how to begin it and I know how I want it to end. So I have somewhat of a roadmap. And once I start developing the beginning, it unfolds itself. If I stay true to my characters and where I want them to end up. Does the pacing fit the storyline? And I talked about this earlier. If you're writing a romantic scene, you don't need to rush through that. I remember I did some editing work for a man that wrote a beautiful historical military fiction novel about a young man from a small town in the South, ends up 19 years old in Vietnam in a village, and he falls in love with the Vietnamese girl. So first of all, to see her, he has to risk being AWOL, court-martialed for leaving the camp, the base at night. He goes into town at night. He sneaks in through her bedroom window and he stays the night with her and leaves at dawn. The first time they do this, the writer, Jim, just rushed through it. Oh no, Jim. Can he hear her heart beating on that little twin bed they're sharing? Is it a muggy night? Are they listening to sounds outside the open window? What is he feeling? Because this is a tortured love story. Almost a Romeo and Juliet. They're both risking death to be together. So you got to make sure the scene you're writing fits the pacing. Don't rush through things like that. Readers love love scenes. Readers love hearing about a hurricane and how somebody survives it. It isn't, okay, Katrina's coming, and the next day, wow, that was something. We all know better than that. For months, we're dealing with it, for years. Okay, so you got to make sure your scene, what you're writing about, fits the pacing. Do the chapters build upon each other into the climax? Does it have a beginning, a middle, first 3 chapters explaining everything, middle, that climax, and all the sliding action to the end? Thank you. How do we develop character? Okay, and I touched upon this just a little bit. I learned about characters through internal and external dialogue. Internal is what a female character is saying in her head. I knew he never loved me. He married me because I was pregnant, and we were both from Catholic families, and my dad would have shot him. So I've been dealing with a lack of love in this marriage since I was 17 years old. And how do you write that dialogue? It's in italic, every bit of it. That's how you set it up. And readers love it. Why? Because they get to be intimate with the character. It's about intimacy. If the reader doesn't connect with the character, they're going to put the book down. Okay. Another way of developing character, how they dress. She was a funny girl. Everything she owned came from a resale shop. One day she had a purple hat on with combat boots. Do you see how much better that is than saying she was a bit of a kook or she was eccentric? Don't tell me, show me. And you could do it through clothes. Right? Or everything had to match with her. I knew it immediately. This was the most uptight woman I've ever met in my life. Right? His hair was perfect. His hair was perfect. Why did this character have to have perfect hair? Did he think it was his crown, the only thing that attracted women? But was he, hiding something from his past? Maybe his father was an unkept man and it embarrassed him as a kid. So everything about this man today is perfect. You can't judge me because our appearance is the first thing people judge us by. Ambition. His ambition was to sell the winning lotto ticket at the Texaco on the corner. Now there's a character that'll immediately make you laugh. He didn't want to be a rich man, he just wanted to have fun, right? Character flaws. She was nervous, constantly biting her nails. When I looked at her hand, every cuticle was chewed off with a little bit of a spot of blood. Don't just write, she's nervous. It could be, I could tell she was attracted to me because she kept playing with her hair. Right? Okay. Write what people do. You know this. And when you feel like you can't write it, when I get writer's block, that tells me I'm not getting it out enough, even with COVID. So you know what I do? I'm lucky enough I live in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, and there's a lot of little outdoor places where people walk. Okay, we got a little beachfront. I'll sit on the beachfront and at 7 a.m, that's when the women walk, and they walk in a pack, 3 or 4 of them, and they're talking the whole time. And I listen to them and I look at what they're wearing. And then because I live just across the bridge from Biloxi and the Air Force Base, early in the mornings when those Air Force guys jog on the weekend. And I think, is it lonely for that young man? Is he from Idaho? He's not used to this humidity. Does he ever meet any girls? How hard is that as a military guy a long way from home? That's how you develop characters. You got to get out, you got to listen, and you got to watch. The everyman. How relatable is this character? Okay. What I mean by that, is she the typical girl next door? Is he the hardworking man that despite a crazy wife, he still comes home every night to his kids? People all over the world know what that is. Character flaws, people's weaknesses, people's strengths. Okay? And let's go to the next slide, please. This is the perfect example about developing a character based on what she wears. Kelly Sparing, a 49-year-old with legs like two pillars of chiseled marble, beginning from the tattered strings of a too short, too tight pair of Levi shorts and ending in a pair of black Lucchese boots, was rarely in a bad mood. The black tank top she was wearing screamed, "You can't spell truth without Ruth." A headshot of Ruth Ginsburg was centered underneath the slogan. I want to go have a beer with Kelly, don't you? So will the reader.
I love
So
it.
will the reader. Okay? Develop characters with how they dress or how they live. Okay. I'll read this very quickly.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
That's all right. So this is another way of describing a character to let the reader know this woman is very interesting.
Mhm.
This is a World War II refugee from Budapest, Hungary, who married an American GI and he died 10 years ago. And the woman across the street is a crazy single mom English teacher who really likes her wine. And it's the first time she's been invited over to meet her neighbor. And she writes, I stared at the house across the street, following the silhouette of Leona Moner Shoepot as she moved from room to room, straightening and cleaning. She was a restless ghost in a mausoleum of lace doilies, crystal vases, and a bleeding heart of Jesus. This is a sad, lonely old woman. Okay? Just tell me she's sad and lonely. Paint the picture for me. Okay, so that's developmental editing. You're really trying to make that manuscript glow. You could do it with the beta reader. Okay? If you can't afford it, look for a developmental editor. Guys, they're all over the website. Okay? In every book, I've had a beta reader or I've hired an editor just because we can't keep, relying on our friends. I just wanted an objective, clearly professional point of view because I'm not perfect. And sometimes when you're writing your own work, you don't see the obvious. Okay. So, in finding that editor, I asked uh, published authors whose work I admired and said, hey, can you recommend someone? And people were so gracious. And I began the conversation until I found someone I was very comfortable with. So, the last thing you want to do is give a publisher or a literary agent a manuscript that's a mess. Okay. All right, let's talk about copy editing. This is just the grammar, the punctuation, stuff like that. And you could get the over-the-top editor, which is this is an example of. Okay. Turn the page, please.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I love this one. I've seen
Yeah.
this before. I love this.
And isn't it great? And I'm trying to have fun with you writers because nobody's perfect. That's why we need a different set of eyes or eyes. If you're in a great writing group where the people are well read, they know what they're doing, that may be all you need. But you got to have somebody else looking at it. So punctuation is important. Here's some editing tips. Do not rush through editing. See, the way it's hard for me to sit in the seat in front of a computer for hours. So I chew gum, I eat candy, I do those things to keep me there, to make me comfortable. I love writing, so that's good for me to do that. However, editing is hard, hard work. So my tip, what works for me, I print it all out, double space, put it in a 3-ring binder, and I read it like a paperback book. I don't rush. I might read 25 pages in an evening with a red pen. I get tired, I stop. Because once you get tired is when you miss it. Okay? Read your work out loud when editing. I do that with dialogue because I want it to sound natural. You don't need all the taglines. She said, he said, she said. Okay? Hire a professional editor. Okay, here's the great thing about writing is that you don't have to get it right the first time. You can have draft after draft, unlike a brain surgeon. Okay? So it's okay. Take a deep breath. If it takes you a couple of years to put out your best work, that's okay. This is your passion. Enjoy it.
Oh.
And this is one of my favorite human beings on earth, Dr. J. Bruce Fuller, um, from New Orleans. He was the one that was my developmental editor on Sisters of the Undertow. And you know what? He made it a better book. Not that he rewrote it for me, but he caught the empty spaces. He caught when I didn't develop a scene well, and he was professional enough and kind enough to say, Johnnie, I'm sending, here's the email, and these are the holes. You got to fix this. Now, I know this is hard to see, so I'm going to call you in minutes. I mean, how great is that? That he took his time out because he didn't want to hurt my feelings. And he said, if there's some things in here that you want to keep, you got to tell me why. You got to have an argument for it. And I am telling you, that is why Sisters of the Undertow won the Kindle Book Award, why it was chosen out of the history of the American Association of University Presses. It was named 100 best books. Alice in Wonderland was included in that. Oh my gosh. The wonderful crazy writer from New Orleans. Oh my gosh. I can't think of the name of the book, but the main character wore the little winter hat, and he worked at the Levi Pant Factory in Bay St. Louis. Confederacy of Dunces was also named on that list. Why do I think I was named on that list along with Confederacy of Dunces, which is a brilliant book? It's because I had a brilliant editor who made me a better writer. It's important. It's important, guys. Okay. Here's me with my muse. This is my pet.
Oh.
And when I cry over a character or scene, she cries too and puts her little head on my lap. And this is my little writing space. I don't do anything else at this space except write. See all those crazy Post-it notes?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I'm in my purse because I might be at the grocery store and think, oh my gosh, I just got this great idea for the character. So I write it down, okay? Because once we really start getting into that novel, that short story, those characters are going to be alive for us, and they're going to start speaking to us. And when they do, You got to be able to write it down, write that note. And Tammy, it's the same way with the children's book. You might be at the grocery store getting milk and eggs, and that little voice will speak to you. I want all of you to look for me on social media, because when your book comes out, I want to be able to do a shout out for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just Johnnie Bernhard on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and all those other fun things. May I answer any questions you may have about your specific work?
I don't have a specific question per se, but what I did want to say is that I really appreciated this presentation and I feel like it was very informative. I don't know about Tammy and John Paul, but I feel like I got a lot, like so much out of this, and I really appreciate it because I really like the fact that you use concrete examples for showing plot and character. Like that was very enjoyable for me, and I could also visualize what you were speaking about. So I kind of wrote a little note about the pyramid because I think it makes it very easy to see how it's structured and also giving those concrete examples. And I also wanted to also say I love that you highlighted Dr. Fuller. I also think he's incredible. Definitely recommend tuning in on Tuesday. One of the like I don't know how to say this. There's a lot of perks to running the writers conference. Obviously meeting people like you, Johnnie, and Dr. Fuller. But one of the downsides is that I can't personally be everywhere. So I get to know all of my presenters, but I can't always tune in to the actual presentations. So hearing you speak is wonderful. But I also moderated the first page American Idol session when Dr. Fuller came to our library, and I hadn't been able to sit in on anything else he did. So I knew that obviously he was a very nice guy, easy to work with. But when I saw him critique those pieces, I absolutely agree with everything you're saying because I was blown away at how good he was at it, especially like this is the first time he's seeing these short pieces of writing, and he was just phenomenal. So definitely tune into that
and what Texas Review Press does as a university press. You know, I've done 3 books under them. And people say, "Don't you want to go anywhere else?" And I say, "Wait. The people I work with are respectful, they're knowledgeable, they're a joy to work with, they're good to me. Why would I want to go anywhere else?" So my poetry writers, they publish poetry, collections of short stories, novellas, okay? And what could be sweeter? You got a guy from Louisiana working there. Of course, he's going to have a soft spot for people from Louisiana. Just saying. And one more thing
yes.
for y'all, if you want it, there's something called the Chicago Manual of Style. It's a great reference book for, do I italicize this? What's the abbreviation? And it's almost standardized in what publishing companies use it and agents. I mean, it's been on the market forever. And what I love about it, let's say I don't know how to use a quote within a quote. Okay, I simply forgot. You go to the index, you look up quotation marks, and it'll show just a great index, and it'll tell you what page to go to reference it. So when you go to that page, it gives the rule and at least 3 or 4 examples. Examples
Awesome.
are good. Examples are good.
Very, very good to know. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay. Y'all take care. Be safe. God bless.